I now give the floor to the observer of the Observer State of Palestine to introduce draft the resolution A/ES10/L31/revision 1.
Mr. President, I congratulate you for the assumptions of the presidency of the 79th session. Mr. President and colleagues, Palestine is an important part of universal history, and the Palestinian people is an integral part of humanity. Neither our country nor our people will disappear. But that is no excuse for ignoring the existential threat they are facing. Palestinians have carved in a reality of suffering and oppression, spaces of joy and accomplishment. Their spirit has remained free, even while they were in shackles. They have preserved hope when everything around them should have led them to despair. They have been true to their identity regardless of the price they had to pay. They have been steadfast in the purest of their inalienable rights, just like all other peoples. Mr. President, the Palestinians want to live, not survive. They want to be safe in their homes. They want their children to go to school without fear. They want to be free in reality as they are in spirit. Free to live, to come and go, free to determine their own fate, subject only to God and to no other. They want to be Palestinians, to be themselves, just be, neither heroes nor victims, just human beings with the simplest of dreams or the greatest of aspirations, living in dignity, in peace and security in their homeland. The Palestinian people is an extraordinary people whose true desire is to lead an ordinary life. Palestinians want to live and thrive on their ancestral land, where the spirit of the forefathers and foremothers embraces them, where the suspended tales of their lives await to be resumed. Palestinians want for children to bury their parents after a long and beautiful life, rather than for parents to bury their children before they could know the meaning of life. Palestinian children do not need to grow through the lessons of terrifying pain. The lessons of life should suffice. Now the sky is full of children whose life was taken away way too soon and in the cruelest of ways. And the earth is full with children who have suffered, who were injured, paralyzed, orphaned, and traumatized. Mr. President, as we speak in these halls, coming together yet again to address this grave, historic injustice. 2 million people are being besieged, bombed, starved. They are being displaced over and over again with no safe haven anywhere, with death awaiting them everywhere. How many more Palestinians need to be killed before change finally takes place to stop this inhumanity? How many more Palestinians need to be violently displaced by the repeated attacks of Israeli settlers and occupation forces? How many more Palestinians need to be snatched in the middle of the night and thrown into an Israeli jail for years and years? Childhoods lost, lives ruined. How much more denial of rights, dispossession, and destruction will it take for the world to finally not only react but act? Until the world not only takes a stance but takes a stand and firmly acts upon it, truly upholding the rule of law and human rights. Mr. President, the General Assembly requested from the International Court of Justice its authoritative opinion on the Israeli occupation, and the court upheld its mandate. Allow me to quote the court, and I quote, "The sustained abuse by Israel of its position as an occupying power through annexation and an assertion of permanent control over the occupied Palestinian territory and continued frustration of the right of the Palestinian people to self-determination violates fundamental principles of international law and renders Israelis' presence in the occupied Palestinian territory unlawful." Unlawful. End of quotation. If we need to identify two cardinal rules, two pillars on which the international law-based order was built, they would be the right of peoples to self-determination and the prohibition of the acquisition of territory by force. And these are the rules that Israel has been breaching openly and brazenly for decades without consequences. The court fulfilled its mandate by unequivocally identifying the legal consequences for Israel. All states and the United Nations, and by placing them before the General Assembly, the Security Council, and all states to take the necessary measures to ensure compliance with international law. This was a historic opinion. Let me repeat. This was a historic opinion, as this was the first time the court examined the Israeli occupation as a whole. Now that the court has answered the request, it is time for the General Assembly to uphold its mandate and for all states to uphold their own obligations to ensure Israel compliance with its own in the face of its blatant non-compliance and relentless breaches. The court's advisory opinion showed that there is no doubt about the facts or the law. But the law is not there to merely serve as a measuring stick of violations. It is there to prevent those violations, and when that does not work, it is there to punish them, to bring them to a halt, to ensure accountability, to ensure justice. Unchecked, undeterred Israeli impunity will only mean more and more Palestinians killed, maimed, detained, more destruction, more loss, more misery. It must be brought to an end. Only then can we expect a genuine change that could lead to peace and to the implementation of the two-state solution. Mr. President, a few voices have claimed that departure from the law or its abandonment was the only realistic way forward. But it is precisely the departure from the law or its breach without any consequence that led us here in the first place. No occupying power can have a veto right over the inalienable rights of the people under its occupation. Let me repeat. No occupying power can have a veto right over the inalienable rights of the people under its occupation. Those who think the Palestinian people will accept a life of servitude, a life of apartheid, are the ones who are not being realistic. Those who imagine the Palestinian people will disappear or surrender are the ones who are not being realistic. Those who claim that peace is possible in our region without a just resolution for the question of Palestine are the ones who are not being realistic. A few voices claim this is not the right time for such action. They always find good reasons to keep doing the wrong thing. But delayed justice is denied justice. The right time to do the right thing is always right now. The right time to do the right thing is always right now. While looking at a map, or worse, looking at the horrific situation on the ground, the matter may look inextricable, but the solution is right before our eyes. It is the one endorsed by the international community as a whole and enshrined in numerous United Nations resolutions. It is an independent and sovereign state of Palestine on the 1967 borders, with East Jerusalem as its capital, living side by side in peace and security with Israel. So why are we allowing the destruction of the state of Palestine and of this solution when we know there is no viable alternative and we all understand the risk of an all-out conflagration? What is happening in Gaza today can be the last chapter of the tragedy endured by the Palestinian people, or will be the first chapter of an even more tragic reality for our region as a whole. What you do next matters. Act now to stop the killing, to stop the suffering, to stop these crimes, to stop this injustice. Mr. President, I have the honor to introduce the draft resolution under consideration in this emergency special session. This is the first time since we've received additional rights and privileges through resolutions that you have adopted. I am so honored to do that for the first time in the General Assembly. I am so tall, I go beyond the ceiling of this General Assembly. This emergency special session is entitled, and I quote, "Advisory Opinion of the International Court of Justice on the legal consequences arising from Israelis' policies and practices in the occupied Palestinian territory, including East Jerusalem, and from the illegality of Israelis' continued presence in the occupied Palestinian territory, end of quotation. As contained in document A/ES-10/L.31/Rev.1. I want to thank more than the 40 countries so far that have co-sponsored the draft resolution. The draft resolution faithfully reflects the advisory opinion of the ICJ, the principal judicial organ of the United Nations, and it is grounded in international law and aims at furthering respect for its rule, for the Palestinian people, but for the international community as a whole. We thank all delegations that engaged on this text and have done our utmost to address their concerns while ensuring the text remains aligned with the opinion rendered by the court. The draft resolution in its preambular paragraphs reflects the determinations arrived at by the court, while focusing in its operative paragraphs on the obligations of Israel, all states, and the United Nations and other international organizations in accordance with international law. It also calls for a number of individual and collective actions to uphold the law and implement the relevant United Nations resolutions on the question of Palestine. It seeks action for accountability, the fundamental path for justice in any case, and Palestine cannot be the exception. Mr. President, I stand on this podium at this historic and tragic juncture to tell the Palestinian people that a change is going to come. A change is going to come. That their fate is not endless suffering and agony. That freedom is their bright right and their destiny. I stand on this podium to tell you that justice is the only path to peace, to call on you, to call on all of you to uphold international law, not sacrifice it on the altar of cold and reckless political calculations. I call on you to reject double standards, to treat my people with the respect they deserve, and to recognize the rights they are entitled to. We are not a people too many. We are not a problem. We are a nation that asks for nothing more than your nations, but can accept nothing less. We want to live in freedom and sovereignty and dignity and peace and security in our ancestral land. We are committed to the rule of international law and to justice and lasting peace in our region. This requires ensuring that same rules apply to all. No bias, no double standards, no exceptionalism, and no exception. Each country has a vote, and the world is watching us to see if we can live up to the commitments we undertake and to the principles we claim as ours at this historic and crucial juncture for humankind. Please stand on the right side of history, with international law, with freedom, with peace. The alternative is what you witness every day on your TV screens, and what the Palestinian people are enduring in their flesh. A different reality is possible, It starts now and here. Free Palestine. Peace for all, and I thank you.
I thank the observer of the observer state of Palestine. I now give the floor to the distinguished representative of Israel.
Thank you, Mr. President. This is my first time speaking here at the General Assembly after the October 7 massacre. 11 months ago, a terrorist army invaded southern Israel. In a single barbaric assault on a Jewish holiday, they murdered over 1,000 of our citizens and carried out the most heinous atrocities in modern history. Hundreds of vibrant young Israelis were murdered while celebrating life at a music festival. Hundreds of innocent people peacefully sleeping in their homes with their families were slaughtered. Some burned alive while holding their loved ones, and hundreds more were taken hostage, dragged into a captivity more brutal than anything anyone could ever imagine. Even now, as we speak, over 100,000 Israelis remain displaced within their own country, unable to return home due to the relentless rocket attacks from Hamas in the south and Hezbollah in the north. Perhaps you have forgotten, but we did not start this war, nor did we choose it. We are fighting a war forced upon us. We are fighting for our homes, our families, our future. We fight because we have no other choice. Yet, despite the cruelties we have faced, despite the unprecedented terror unleashed upon our people, this assembly remains silent. I was certain that the first resolution that would be brought before you all would be the unanimous, unequivocal condemnation of terror, the rape, the torture, the kidnappings that took place on that darkest of days. Yet, there has been no condemnation, no resolutions. Instead, we gather here to watch the Palestinians' UN circus, a circus where evil is righteous, war is peace, murder is justified, and terror is applauded. How dare you continue this tradition?